Hello, good people. This is Sister Julia Walsh, and you're listening to Messy Jesus Business. Welcome to the Mess. I'm here with Vincent Noth, who is the Executive Director of the Kinship Community Food Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A former youth pastor and director of education, Vincent has also served as a consultant with the Peace Corps in Eastern Europe. He holds a B.F.A. from Carnegie Mellon University and an M.A. in religion from Trinity International University. Vincent, welcome to Messy Jesus Business.
Thanks, Sister Julia. So grateful to be here with you.
You are working hard in Milwaukee at the Kinship Community Food Center, and we'll get into what's happening there and what your work is like and what you're discovering about the people of God in that special place. But before we do, I always love to start our conversations with the guest story, with a bit of their vocation. And so I'm wondering how you became who you are, this leader in Milwaukee. I know you grew up there, you're a native Milwaukeean, yet you went away to school and you came back and now you're executive director of Kinship. How did this happen and how did you come to know your calling?
I could summarize very briefly to say that, yes, I am a son of this city. I love Milwaukee and I'm so grateful to be a part of the city and this community that I live in. Here on the north side, my neighborhood is called Harambee. Our center straddles two neighborhoods, Riverwest and Harambee. And I think I could just sum it up to say how I ended up here is my parents and my education. So I'm the fourth of 9 children. And when you have parents like I have, they just had to love and sacrifice like everything for themselves for us, and my family's not perfect. They're not perfect, but their witness of life and the way they lived their life and the way they poured out their life for their kids was the biggest formative thing in my life. And faith was a part of that. But then also they made a very interesting decision. They were sort of civil rights Catholics. My mom thought that we'd go to Catholic parochial school, but when they issued the busing initiatives to integrate the public schools here in Milwaukee, my parents were like, we want to be a part of that. I grew up on the Lower East Side of Milwaukee, but it's a predominantly white neighborhood. Milwaukee is the most segregated metro area in America.
Wow.
And so we can get into some of that. That segregation has kind of marked my story, but certainly a lot of our stories here in Milwaukee. So I'd get on a bus, a couple blocks from my house every day from 5-year-old kindergarten and then all the way through my education. And I went to public school in the central city. And those schools were incredible. The schools really messed me up because like the teachers in my public grade school had created a little utopia. And it was Black and white and Hispanic teachers. You could tell that they were all about building a new world and building an integrated world. But what that also means is I saw inequality from a young age. Like, why isn't the trash getting picked up in the neighborhood where my school is, but it gets picked up near my house, right? Or all those questions around unequal access. And a lot of my friends were at a different socioeconomic level. And we were middle class. But from childhood, I saw entrenched, systemic, racialized poverty as well. So I saw all the beautiful things about the neighborhoods where my schools were, but I also saw the inequities. And so I majored in art and I went off to a conservatory school for drama. And I had all these grand plans to leave Milwaukee and come back to visit, but not to stay and not to go through the winters. But things kept happening to pull me back here. And so I did end up meeting my wife. I've been married 24 years. My wife and I have done a lot of ministry and a lot of community work together over that time. My wife and I also served in the Peace Corps. And seeing poverty in the developing world even more confirmed my kind of calling back here to my city. Like I was like, wow, there's poverty in my own city and the culture that I best understand that is equally problematic and challenging that as in places in the developing world. And so I probably wrestled all through my 20s, but I think I kind of
Mhm.
finally acquiesced in my 30s, like, all right, I'm called to be here. And then I soon discovered the joy in that calling and how much I love Milwaukee and I love being a part of this city.
So I'm hearing there was a pull, there was a call, there was also awareness and disturbance that happened along the way. So it makes me curious how you define call. How do
Yeah.
you know when something's a call and not just an attraction?
Well, my faith journey is not a straight line. Um,
Good.
yeah, right, exactly. To change often. I really had a devotion as a child. Like my mom would tuck me in at night and say, like, Jesus lives in your heart. And when you
Mm,
speak with him, he's right there. But if you ignore him, it's like you're putting bars around your own heart.
mm.
And I still have my 7-year-old image of Jesus in a little cell in my heart. And he had a bunk bed, and there's like a picture of Mother Mary on the wall. And it was like, talk to me. You know what I mean? Hang out with me. So I,
Huh.
I, I had that devotion as a kid, but pretty quickly cast it aside. This doesn't make sense in the real world. Probably sixth grade, seventh grade. I think first time I got punched in the eye on the soccer field and I tried to turn the other cheek and I just got teased by all my friends about it. I pretty quickly was like, yeah, like this sounds nice. You know what I mean? So I was a pretty rebellious teenager and kind of wild. But how I would define call for in the most dramatic sense is I was at Carnegie Mellon University School of Drama, and one of my best friends took me to a Central City church in Pittsburgh called Covenant Church of Pittsburgh,
Hmm.
and I was called. Like I was called by God. I had an encounter with God that is truly extraordinary. It was mystical. I was weeping, and I went up to the front of the church afterwards, and they prayed over me. And if it was just a psychological phenomenon, I would be telling you about something that happened to me 30 years ago in the central city of Pittsburgh, but I felt God's presence with me in a new dynamic way. I felt the Holy Spirit. And
Mm.
and so that's one way to define call is like the Apostle Paul road to Damascus thing. And that really happened in my life. My life radically changed. Eventually, that call there in Pittsburgh
Huh.
led me to do a lot of ministry work. I was in the non-denominational world,
Mhm.
and especially in like kind of more charismatic urban parishes
Hmm.
for many years. I went to seminary. I was ordained a pastor,
Hmm.
and so most of my 20s and early 30s were doing pastoral work with my wife in on the north side of Milwaukee here,
Huh.
working with youth. But then in some ways, I began to start to feel a call back to the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
And that was not a comfortable. I was so happy. I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
And
that sounds
I
like God.
yeah, exactly.
God doesn't let us stay in our comfort zones,
It
right?
doesn't. And I
Yeah.
was reading a lot of church fathers. I was reading a lot more mystical theology, and I
Mm,
felt like I wasn't at home anymore in my
mm,
tradition. But I had painted the Catholic Church in a particular way. And certainly the journey back wasn't easy, but I definitively was called back, as definitively as that first call was. And that's the tricky thing, right? A call is different than just something that's reason based,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's something that is love based. The heart knows reasons that reason doesn't know, you know,
Mm,
but then it lines up with reason, right, in the long
mhm,
run. And so I think call of those things in our life that we can only attribute to God's divine interruptions.
hmm.
I remember I went to a conference in Los Angeles, like probably in 2006, 2005. It was a pastor's conference. I was on pastoral staff at a non-denominational church here in Milwaukee. And I heard John Perkins speak, who's the head of the Christian Community Development Association, which does church based, urban focused ministry. And everybody heard him speak. They heard the same thing I heard, and they got up to go to lunch. And I sat in that big auditorium all by myself, and I just wept
Huh.
for like, half an hour. And I just knew that whatever I was doing in ministry, I was being called to urban work and
Oh.
to work among the poorest of the poor in my city. But at that time in 2005, I didn't know what that would mean, but I knew
Mm.
I was being called, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm answering the question.
No, no, I think what you're doing well is dancing around the mystery, which is
Yeah.
all we can really do when it comes to big questions like this. I mean, people have written volumes trying to define things like call, and it's it's still mystery actually. So,
Yeah.
yes. I'm noticing these broad strokes of different ways that God has been so present to you and worked with you and moved you along to the next thing, and you used who you are as a person and what works effectively to communicate with you. Like, God knows you and communicate, like, okay, if I help this guy have an emotional experience, then he's going to pay attention.
Right. That's right.
Versus, somebody else, like, it's very logical and then they pay attention. So isn't that also the beauty and the wonder of relationship with God, is like God works with each of us according to who we are and what makes sense for how we operate as people. Amazing. uh
Absolutely.
yeah, and I love hearing this story of how ultimately this other call arrived of working with the urban poor in Milwaukee, and I'm guessing that's what then led you to Kinship. So tell me about kinship and the work, and we could do us a whole social analysis of like why kinship has to exist and why we don't want it to exist, right? But maybe we start just first, like, what's happening and what are you noticing?
Yeah, so I'll say first that I've lived in Riverwest-Harambee for 24 years. My wife and I very intentionally moved here because we wanted to be local in a
Mm,
community, be proximate. And so what's interesting is for many years I lived here and I never walked into Kinship, which was formerly called the Riverwest Food Pantry.
mm,
And so Riverwest Food Pantry started in 1979, but it's been Kinship for the last three. But what happened when I did walk in, I came to volunteer and help distribute food to the
mm,
hungry. And I thought, well, I'll try this. This is something I'll check out. And this was actually in that transition when I was first coming back, making full communion with the Catholic Church. I saw my neighbors. Like I
yeah,
saw the Puerto Rican family that made the best food at our block party. And I
uh-huh,
used to sit out on this stoop outside one of these corner stores. And I saw all these guys that I knew. You know, charity work is often about trying to go and ameliorate a situation someplace else. But whether it's my background in community development or I work in the Peace Corps, or my work in ministry, the books I've read, I felt this very clear need for that community. It was like,
mm,
I need to be received in a community. And I live in this neighborhood, and this is the place where all the folks that are most marginalized come and gather to get food.
mm,
And that was a light bulb for me because I was like, oh, this is an asset in the community. Like, not
mm,
just because people are getting food here, but this is sort of the who's who
mm,
of the neighborhood of what's really going on in the neighborhood underneath the
mm,
surface. And so we started from that point. So right around that time, Riverwest Food Pantry had been being run by all volunteers. And at that time it was mostly retired teachers, mostly women in their 70s and 80s.
mm,
And right around that time, the woman who was volunteering 50 hours a week, God bless her heart, she's still here in the neighborhood,
mm.
broke her knee.
Oh.
And it was right around this time where it was what's going to happen? And my background was helping nonprofits when I was overseas. There was a school social worker at a public school and a parish priest, because there were
Mm,
two different sites. And I said to them, if you just want to distribute food, I don't know that I'm the person
mm,
to help. But if you're interested in finding out what we could learn through food, if food was an entry point in the neighborhood, I'm very interested in that. And that was the premise. And we just said, okay, if food is our entry point, food is going to gather us. And then we started to realize, okay, well, community is going to change us. And
yeah.
I've been there 13 and a half years, and it's just been an incredible journey of
Mm,
watching just that one simple shift. And then I would say, no, there's two shifts. One is food as an entry point, but the second shift is, you know, not not going to do this work to improve somebody else's life, but going because you deeply need community yourself.
yeah.
You deeply need to be received and to be known and loved yourself. And you want to know and love, and you want to be received. Those two things have been our North Star. And of course, then lo and behold, you start to discover some of the best stuff happening all around the world. It's the same North Star. I listened to Father Greg Boyle on your podcast, and he's a hero of mine. But there's so many like this that are like, oh, it's all about mutuality. It's all about not going to the margins to make a difference, but going so that you're made different. Without getting into all the other, there's a lot of cool stuff happening at Kinship now, and businesses and mentoring and all this stuff. But
you're more than a food pantry now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. I remember when I came and visited, you showed me, this is where we have cooking classes. This is where the garden is. The food pantry was a grocery store model, right? And there was beauty and there was art and it was colorful and joyful. And it didn't have a sense of like, we're just doing what we can here. It's like, there was like this sacramentality to it, but also everything was dignifying for everybody who came through the door. It didn't matter what role they were coming in to help or to receive help, right?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, so yeah, we have a public market. It's free. There's probably about 17,000 people a year that shop there. But when you get there, it feels more like a farmer's market.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are always inviting chefs to do demos. So like right now, we have a ton of produce. And so chefs are taking bok choy or peppers and figuring out what to do. But then we also make meals from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
We have a farm now. So we started with community gardens, and now we have a 27,000 square foot urban greenhouse farm. They're hoop houses, just about a mile and a half from where I sit. And we grow about 20,000 pounds of organic produce there. We do a ton of food events. So we have a feast meal. Most of the feasts when the weather's warmer on our farm, or we're cooking off the farm. And then we do a ton of food wellness events. So about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I didn't have any budget to have a crisis assistance center or social workers, but I thought, well, what if I could just gather some of the neighbors and we could just try to accompany people? And the program that is now called Stride, which is like walking with people, was born. And so Kinship accompanies a lot of people in crisis. Now we do have 2 social workers, but we have about 30 Stride mentors. And they just latch on to somebody. We give them a clear lane of what they're not supposed to do. But, Kinship helps about 100 people find housing a year. What we do is we triage. So we work with probably about 80 or 90 other nonprofits. We are like either the warm handoff or the connection point between the resources. But then after doing a lot of crisis work for many years, we started to dream about doing a food-based social enterprise. And so 3 years ago, we launched a workforce training program where a quarter of the trainees' paid time is working on themselves. Very similar to Homeboy Industries. We say heal on the clock and train on the clock. And now Kinship has launched a successful cafe in the Bronzeville neighborhood, just 6 blocks in the other direction.
Okay.
And we're launching.
You know what? I ate lunch there last time I was in Milwaukee.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. I had a great taco salad or something. I loved it. And I was thinking, great. I wonder if these vegetables are growing right here in Milwaukee. And
yeah. Well, so we're not quite there yet, but we're launching a catering business this fall. And then we have land now. We've closed on some land. And in the coming years, we're going to build a beautiful community food center, Milwaukee's first community food center that kind of is a whole social ecosystem. Food is an entry point, but we really focus on fighting loneliness. We call ourselves kind of more like a therapeutic community. You know what I mean? The community, we really think, is where the power is for us to heal and to change and to move forward.
I agree with you 100%. Community is the formula for transformation for people and for healing. It's not just for responding to basic needs, like they're presenting as hungry or unhoused. You need a support system. You need friendship. You need ways to socially connect, and that's going to improve your health too. Much of what you're describing, Vincent, is so gospel for me. It's almost utopian. Like this is what I believe the church is meant to be. And it's almost like you've described everything, but this is our worship space where we all come together and pray. So the reality is you're doing this for people of many different faith traditions and somehow building this intercultural, intergenerational, interreligious community. And
Yeah.
so like this is the gospel on earth, right?
Right.
Like this is what
Right.
Jesus was talking about. But what is tough about that in 2025?
Yeah, that's great. We use the metaphor of a compost. One of the women who's a leader in our Stride program was formerly unhoused and living on the street. And one time she said, this place, it kind of like, because she went to the farm and she saw the compost and she said, this place kind of reminds me of a compost.
Mm,
And she's like, wait, don't take it the wrong way. She's like, on the farm, I was like, what is this stinking mess over here in the corner? You know?
mhm,
And then she said, but then I learned, and I was sitting there with the farmer and he was showing me, no, we turn this over, we cultivate this, we add that. And all of a sudden it becomes the nourishing, life-giving soil that nourishes the whole rest of the garden.
mhm.
And so we're big fans of Madeline Del Brel here and Catherine Doherty. I don't know if you're fans of either of them, but
Tell us all about them.
well, Catherine Doherty's Madonna House.
Uh-huh.
So Doherty, like they're,
In Canada, right?
in Canada, and both are contemporaries of Dorothy Day. And Delbrel was in France
Okay.
and living in a communist neighborhood in France. But Catherine Doherty used to say, if you can't find God in the horse shit, you're not going to find him anywhere.
Mm,
And what we found here is that the gospel germinates in the brokenness of our lives, right? And when our woundedness
mm,
is being cultivated and nourished with the other people around us, and when we can be authentic and messy,
yeah.
um, the Eucharistic life is
Yeah.
flowing through us into one another reciprocally. And so I think that in one sense, that's a good picture of kinship, is that
Mm,
there's so much rich nourishment and there's all these beautiful plants sprouting up. But if you try to say, like, well, what's the source of all this? It's not always immediately apparent. It's like, well, the source has been a lot of pain. The source has been a
mm,
lot of disruption. The source has been a lot of trauma. But that's where the kingdom of God germinates and grows. And so it's messy, it's complicated.
mm,
And there's a lot of people in recovery in our community that have been like
mhm,
deeply wounded by the church, but they're like, yeah, but I love it here. You know what I
mhm,
mean? And so I believe that these third spaces, these other places, can be places where the gospel incarnates and becomes real for people. They had a relationship with God, but now in their own way, they're reconciling with the church. And that might just be like, all right, not all religious people are out here to get me kind of thing,
yeah, yeah.
It's complex, and
Uh-huh.
we don't always agree on the issues. I've heard people say it's not what you stand for, it's where you stand or with whom you stand. And we are committed to standing with each other.
Mm,
So even when the issues divide us, we're kind of like, yeah, let's get back to growing the food. Let's
yeah.
get back to like cooking the meal. Let's get back to walking with this person to help them get through this eviction. And then we're
Mm,
like, maybe we're all headed in the same direction, right?
mm,
Even though we don't all necessarily always agree on whatever the
mm,
religious issue or the political issue that the
mm,
culture is trying to divide us over.
mm. So to have a common mission that's just superhuman, like people need to be fed and housed and have friends. People need to have friends, right? Like very basic human needs is your mission. And so because that's your mission, it sounds like it can ground you through all that chaos of trauma and division, polarities, politics. Like all that almost can evaporate because you're just focused on the feeding of folks and
Yeah,
such.
well, I think there's a second layer to that. But let me just say this. When you look at the social encyclicals,
Mm,
the letter from Pope Francis about our care for creation, right? Or a
yeah.
letter about
Let out to sea.
Laudato Si, right? Like, they're not just issued to the religious people, they're
Yeah.
issued to all people of goodwill.
Yeah.
It's almost like an undiscovered treasure in the church or in our world, where it's like that sense of there is so much we hold in common.
Yeah.
So what I would say the core thing is, yes, like the basic frailty we all have, the need for food and shelter, but the deeper thing is the need for community, the need for friendship, the need for kinship, right? A
Mm.
tribe around you that's like, you know what? I don't I don't have to necessarily agree with you on everything, but I see you and I want you to self-actualize, and the worst thing you did doesn't get to define you,
Mm.
and we're in no matter what place and you can always come back here. Those types of places are like perennial for people. They have a power to weave people together that transcends the normal things that divide us, the socioeconomic, the racial, the religious, the political, but it has to be authentic. It has to be sacrificial. People really have to want to show up for each other. But when that happens, and it happens with momentum, it becomes on a different plane almost than a lot of the ways that we're normally dividing up.
So, Vincent, you're a charismatic leader. You've got a way of using words in a way that I could see, like how people would just listen to you speak and be like, I'm on board. I'm totally inspired. Like, sign me up. When do I start volunteering? How can I donate? Right?
Thank you.
It's true. This is probably what you're called to do, and you're using your gifts for the greater good. Thanks be to God. And leadership is messy, it's complicated. You don't always have people pleased with what you're doing or understanding your choices. So, what do you have to say to others who are motivated to build community and to respond to the divisions, to feed the hungry in their context, but maybe are feeling a little bit insecure about their own leadership abilities?
Well, one thing that was really a great gift in my life is to be local, to be proximate. Like, I
Yeah.
think we get caught up in wanting to try to change some big thing, and we're not thinking like about our block or our
Mm.
neighborhood or something very tangible. Most of my life is within like a 1 square mile. So when people are like, "Oh my gosh, you're so like," nobody says that in this neighborhood about me. They're all like, "Yeah, that's Vin." Like, do you know what I mean? They see the real story, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's a protective mechanism in my life. The second thing is to really want to be known and loved, not just to want to give of yourself, but to know how deeply, to discover how deeply you need to be received. And I think anybody that's like proximate to a shelter or a food pantry or whatever it is, if you just are like, I'm just going to show up there and I need to be received, I want to give love and receive love, and that's all you focused on, you would be so shocked to find that after a few years of planting there, there'd be this little pod. St. John of the Cross has this great thing where he says,
Mm.
where you don't find love, put love, and then guess what? You'll find love. And so to be known and loved, that's a simple thing. The last part of it is a big part of my spiritual journey, is a firm commitment that the present moment, reality is my teacher.
Ah.
Reality is the only place I can access God. And so a big part of leadership, or leadership in ministry certainly, is for you to be able to find a way to connect with your higher power, to connect
Mm.
with the God of your understanding.
Mm.
And for me, I can only do that in the real circumstances of my life.
Mm.
So if that means I have a cold, or if that means that two of the staff don't trust each other or and at each other's throats, or if that means that this project that we spent like a year working on is falling apart, then the first move is, yes, this is the only access point to the truth, to spiritual truth, which is my circumstances. And
Ah.
like, I'm ambitious and I have all the same impulses to want to build something
Mm.
for God. But most of the time, that leaves me burnt out
Mm.
and feeling less than. But if I'm just like really grounded in the reality of my life,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is my spiritual teacher, it's
Yeah.
like Jean Pierre de Caussade says, the sacrament of the present.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, there's no access point to the divine in the past or in the future. This is it. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, sharpen your taste buds to enjoy the meal that God has served up, which is the
Yeah.
right now, the here and the now.
What
Yeah.
I'm hearing, and see if I'm getting this right. So be in touch with the reality of God in the present moment, and how even the things that don't go according to our ideals is holy and sacred, and is the call and the invitation to where God's inviting us to go. And then be in touch with the reality of ourselves. So being aware of our own needs, our own weaknesses, our strengths, and like constantly doing that work of letting these things be in relationship with one another. I want to feel needed and I want to feel appreciated. So maybe sometimes I try too hard, so I need to chill out. Like whatever
Yes.
that thing is, right? Owning it for oneself is going to help a person to then be more present to the sacred that's right there in that moment with them. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. There's one other thing that comes to mind, which is don't go it alone.
Yeah. Right.
Like I look back in the last 13 years or whatever, 14 years, and there's a lot of people here in my neighborhood that are my compadres, like the people with whom I'm in community with. Like they're what I'm going to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's going to be like, didn't you help raise money to build that building and launch that cafe? But it's the relationships of the things that
Hmm.
are going to that are going to outlast. How can you build community if you're not in community? Right? You can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's a tough one. That's a tough one because
Mm.
there's nobody that knows my
Mm.
weaknesses and can point them out better than my wife. And I'm sure someone who's lived in community, it's the same for you. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
this is where the sandpaper is most at work on the rough patches in my life.
You bet. Sure is. It's like, so you meant commitment, Julia? Like, I feel like is what God's saying to me all the time.
Yes.
Really? And I'm thinking about how, as you know, I'm a Franciscan sister, and one of the things we talk about in the Franciscan tradition, my paraphrase of it, is that the meaning of life is really found in relationships.
Mm.
Like it's not ultimately in what we build, what we make. Like you've brought that up a little bit, right? Or the amount of funds we can contribute to something or help. But it truly is, how are we in relationship with God, with ourselves, with others? What's the quality of those relationships? Are they right relationships? Are they mutual relationships? Are we honoring God's presence in all the people that we encounter? Which, brings me back to a word that you mentioned earlier, which is Eucharistic.
Mm.
And how the work that you're doing as a community builder and feeding people, yes, but really the composting of people's traumas and pains and disturbances ultimately can feed the community and help the community be more whole and holy. And this work of each of us moving through our lives in a way that's acknowledging that we're all blessed, we're all broken, we all are meant to be in unity with one another here, right?
Mm.
And I'm just curious what else you would have to say about that, especially as it relates to the reality of like systemic injustice, of poverty, inequality, of how the epidemic of loneliness is plaguing all of us.
I don't want to sidestep or
Mm.
diminish the powerful systemic barriers my community faces. It's not enough for us all to just, love one another in the compost bin. This city, the story of my community, the story of my neighborhood is not pretty. The history of the Great Migration and so many of the folks of color that were, fleeing a kleptocracy in the South where they had no justice and came up here. Milwaukee was a booming blue collar machine shop in the 50s and 60s, and black migration here peaked in the 1960s. And that's like right when all of the redlining was at its worst. There was race riots, there was fair housing marches. But the two things that happened in this neighborhood to the black community, one was white flight, and then the other one was globalization. And all of these companies started to close. And Milwaukee and Detroit are the two cities that have lost the most blue collar jobs since 1970. We then, ever since that, have been stuck in this cycle of higher unemployment. Wisconsin has the highest minority incarceration rate of any state, right? It's double the national average. Part of my zip code and the zip code just across the freeway from me has data that if you're a Black boy, on the day you're born, there's like a 50 to 60% chance you'll serve time in jail or prison. So many of our men and the fathers are not here in our community. They're shipped off to some other community in our state, in the carceral system. So it's like everywhere you look, there's huge systemic barriers, even just access to healthy food, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we need like food systems, I can get on the food systems. We can just talk about like how we're subsidizing all the wrong food, and we're not subsidizing local farmers. We're not subsidizing products that actually are going to help people improve their health. So all of those things are true. One of the things that we do with our volunteers that I think has been the most successful is we're just trying to use their charitable impulse, their impulse to serve, to lead to questions of justice and hopefully also lead to the deepest questions of solidarity, right? We want people to move from, service to those questions that are like, well, how did we get here? And why are so many people in this community unable to self-actualize? But then the deeper thing is, I'm not going to self-actualize without them. Yeah. Right? Metro Milwaukee's 20-something zip codes, but it's one city. And so a big part of what we do is try to frame that story, but we don't frame it from the perspective of like, you wealthier white suburbs need to come help us here in the central city. It's like, no, you're missing out. Like we're missing out because we don't have one another. Like there's empty places at the table and we all want to be at the same table. And so I do think that even though we need big systemic change, it has to be actualized, right? We actually have to want to cook together. We actually have to want to know each other's story. The coolest learning for us in the last 5 to 7 years has been all around loneliness and the power that healthy relationships have in all of our lives. Like, you've heard a lot of different leaders say, hurt people when you're traumatized. But we see absolutely here in our community that people that are healing are also healing the people around them. Yeah. And we see so many people finding this sort of therapeutic community. And for the first time in their life, they put down the trauma tool belt. And they're like, wait, you guys are really going to show up for me? And then they begin to look inward and say, trauma is about disconnection from our true self. And they can look inward and begin to say, well, wait a minute, I want to grab a hold of my narrative and I want to live into my narrative. Our name is Kinship because we believe that that's really the antidote, is we need kinship with one another. We need to be bound together in this tribe and to acknowledge that we face real systemic challenges. We can't diminish that there's powers that are working against our community to thrive. So both of those things are true.
So then, is it your dream that all the people involved in kinship end up becoming like activists? as they become more healed, as they become more conscious of the systemic injustices, and then feels a draw to move from charity to solidarity?
I don't think we're all going to agree on how to solve the problem.
Yeah.
But can we agree on the problem?
Right.
Like, can we agree that the kids right down the street here at North Division High School, where the graduation rate is like 50%, they do not have the same shot as the kids like 2 miles down the road at the suburban high school, where the graduation rate is 98%. Like, can we just agree on that? And can we recognize that that's unjust? It's just that simple. So what are your 10 proposed solutions? Are they there? We only have 3 in common. Of my 10 are different, but like what the powers do is they alienate us from each other to the point that we're not even agreeing on what the problem is, the common problem that we're fighting. We're fighting each other instead. So I would love to see myself become a better activist. And there are a lot of people that I think kinship has been that doorway for them to get activated, whether it's wages or whether it's fair housing. But I think we're so divided that we're not even agreeing on common problems anymore.
Yeah. Before our conversation, I was thinking a little bit of what I wanted to highlight, or I hope to highlight and hear about in our conversation, and was hoping we sort of would name the very basic human right is food, right? And yet we know that food is used as a political weapon and in a very serious way. And starvation is a weapon of war. So we're conscious of that in a very global way. Yet it's the reality here in Wisconsin. And it's the reality throughout this country that we use economic injustice as a way to keep people from, like you say, self-actualization, but I would say even the project of truly being human and working for and contributing themselves to the common good.
Yeah.
So we've explored a lot of messiness here together, my friend. I'm really, really grateful for your time and your leadership, and we'll continue to hold the people of Kinship and in my heart and prayers. What else would you like to say about the messiness of gospel living?
I'm really grateful to be here with you. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share a little of my story and Kinship's story. I think I would just say that it's the treasure buried in the field. I feel like I had so many grand designs for my life. It took me a while to put all that down and just kind of look that there was a treasure buried right beneath my feet. Just to have eyes to see that, like, the gift of community, the invitation for me to be transformed was like right beneath my feet. My belief is that if I stay true to that, I stay planted and rooted in that I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to where I need to get. And I know that there's so many people that I'm helping, but there's so many people that are helping me get there too. And I think that's where the sustaining power is. I want to show up for the people in need in this community, but I need people to show up for me too.
Healthy interdependence.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Vincent, what else would you like our listeners to know about Kinship Community Food Center?
Yeah, check us out, kinshipmke.org. If you're in the Milwaukee area, come to the Kinship Cafe. We have an urban farm. We have a beautiful community food center, and we'll be hopefully developing and building a new center in the years to come. I'm hoping it's a hub for anybody that wants to learn about this kind of work. It's a blueprint for how to use food as an entry point in a neighborhood to do so much more. And yeah, we'd love you to come check us out. Be generous if you can give a donation, and we're going to keep doing what we do.
Yeah, thanks be to God. Thank you so much, Vincent, for coming on Messy Jesus Business.
Thank you, Sister Julia. It's so good to get this time with you.
Messy Jesus Business is produced and edited by Colin Wamskans. You can find us online at messyjesusbusiness.com and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. If you like what you heard, please be sure to mention our podcast to your friends and followers. And we'd love to have your support via Patreon. From the bottom of our hearts and the middle of the mess, thank you. Messy Jesus Business is produced in partnership with the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration. You can learn more about our religious community and donate to our mission at www.fspa.org. I'm Sister Julia Walsh, and I'll catch up with you next time. Until then, peace and all good.